Canada gets a lot of freebies from us, by the way. They should be grateful also, but they're not. I watched your prime minister yesterday. He wasn't so grateful.
Mark Carney's Davos speech. You'll widely hear that this was the best speech of all time, and defines the new era. What is this, like, I have a dream? Does the speech hold up to this high bar? Let's find out. Mark Carney had a speech at the World Economic Forum, which is an annual event for the ruling class in Davos, Switzerland. Some background context of the speech. The host and guy who introduced Mark Carney is the CEO of BlackRock, and he is in a room filled with ruling class, elite business owners, world leaders, etc. So the audience of the speech is generally the capital-owning class. About 2 weeks before this speech, America invaded and couped Venezuela explicitly for their oil resources. Then, just before this speech, in the week leading up to it, Greenland became the target of Trump's desire. And at the time of the speech, Greenland was under acute threat from the US. And Greenland is in NATO. It's a NATO-protected country. Let's dig into the contents. Anti-socialist propaganda. Let's talk about the propaganda underlying it. Anti-socialist, anti-communist propaganda.
In 1978, the Czech dissident Václav Havel, later president, wrote an essay called The Power of the Powerless. And in it, he asked a simple question: how did the communist system sustain itself? And his answer began with a greengrocer. Every morning, this shopkeeper places a sign in his window: "Workers of the world unite." He doesn't believe it. No one does.
Mark Carney uses the historic metaphor of a Czech dissident and frames the speech around the question of how did the communist system sustain itself. So this is the overarching metaphor throughout the speech, and it's an anti-worker position. Mark Carney uses this metaphor to paint a picture of a rotten system sustained through small collective actions and people buying into the system, putting up the sign in the window, in this case, that says workers solidarity, workers unite, whatever.
And because every shopkeeper on every street does the same, the system persists. Not through violence alone, but through the participation of ordinary people in rituals they privately know to be false.
Carney says nobody actually believes that, right?
Workers of the world unite. He doesn't believe it. No one does.
Nobody actually cares about workers, right? Everybody obviously knows that workers can't unite people. That's what Carney says. As he speaks to a crowd of ruling class elite, they really like that. And that part is what particularly pissed me off about this speech, that underlying it is a clear anti-worker narrative. He's using his speech to foment anti-worker thought. Nobody could believe it.
Workers of the world unite. He doesn't believe it. No one does.
Mark Carney is a 10-plus millionaire who owns several homes. He is a cartoonish depiction of a ruling class elite central banker. He is a capitalist to the bone. What pissed me off about this is such a gross talking down towards workers as a metaphor to a system that he describes as rotten but continues to uphold. It's a room of capital owners talking down to the working class. Capitalist propaganda is throughout this speech. To that point, in the speech, Carney lauds how he is cutting taxes on wealthy people.
Since my government took office, we have cut taxes on incomes, on capital gains, and business investment.
His austerity and sacrifice policies excite him, and he thinks it's a selling point to this room full of world leaders and business leaders, because he's trying to sell the country with this speech. Come here, come to Canada, we're lowering taxes. He's excited by his own austerity politics. Mark Carney's firing tens of thousands of public workers, good-paying, unionized jobs. And that's part of the celebration and advertisement to this audience. It pisses me off. On the pro-capitalist front, he also points to how America's hegemony has provided good things. So let me get this. Mark Carney seems to think that American hegemony was overall good?
This fiction was useful. And American hegemony in particular helped provide public goods, open sea lanes, a stable financial system, collective security, and support for frameworks for resolving disputes. So we placed the sign in the window.
He's saying that American hegemony and domination since World War II brought good things to Canada and the Western Alliance. But this is the antithesis to his whole speech. His whole speech is saying, hey, we're participating in a rotten system that we need to call out and point to how it's failing us. He ignores how America dominated the globe and continues to do so as the foremost military superpower, particularly after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, just where America essentially rubs their dick and balls all over the planet, and countries like Canada have been compliant because they thought it would never turn to them. And this is why I think Mark Carney still has to point to the benefits of American hegemony and American capitalism. He's a capitalist. He wants that system to continue while reimagining the rules-based international order. So I think he has to gesture to the good things that capitalism has brought us, while still trying to maintain this metaphor of the whole system being rotten. Those two things to me are at odds, and it's not a contradiction that he really addresses. And last point on anti-socialist, anti-communist propaganda is how he wants to collaborate and expand AI and working with international countries, like-minded democracies, to advance AI technology.
And on AI, we're cooperating with like-minded democracies to ensure that we won't ultimately be forced to choose between hegemons and hyperscalers.
Bro, he is in love with the idea of AI and using it to displace the workforce to the benefit of the ruling class. Now again, remember, he's speaking to a room of business owners and ruling class elite. The workers will continue to suffer, and Mark Carney has no real plan or strategy on how to protect workers and their rights from AI takeovers and mass layoffs, because primarily that's what AI is being used as. It's a labor displacement tool. All that anti-socialist stuff underlying and being within the speech, it makes a clear picture that Mark Carney, despite showing a little bit of spine against America, is still a capitalist dog who wants to maintain the capitalist world order, just not with America on top. The rupture and some truths. Mark Carney said some refreshing truths in this speech. He broke some of the normal silent monotony of subordination to American empire.
We participated in the rituals, and we largely avoided calling out the gaps between rhetoric and reality. This bargain no longer works. Let me be direct. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition.
He doesn't name America here. He just uses pseudonyms like great powers and whatnot. To me, it's just like, okay, if you're going to make a speech against America and calling for the middle powers to unite, you probably should name America as the problem. But I agree, there is a fundamental rupture, not just to Canadian life, but the global international order. America is clearly the source of that rupture, the biggest source of instability. 100% agree. Now, using his anti-communist metaphor, he portrays the fragility of the international system and how the illusion can begin to crack.
And its fragility comes from the same source. When even one person stops performing, when the greengrocer removes his sign, the illusion begins to crack. Friends, it is time for companies and countries to take their signs down.
In this case, Greenland is the crack. That makes sense here. What doesn't get said is admission and real understanding of Canada's complicity and compliance with America's empire. It's mostly just gesturing towards the rupture because it has turned its eyes towards us, Canadians. Carney talks about the weaponization of systems, the weaponization of the rules-based international order, how integration can become a tool of subordination.
But more recently, great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination.
I agree with all this. These are true facts of international relations, and particularly important in Canada. Canada is so integrated with the United States. Our militaries are integrated, our roads are integrated, our trading system is integrated. We are fundamentally attached to the American empire, and that is being used as a weapon against us. 100% agree. He also talks about how the rule of law is being applied unevenly based on who the perpetrators are and who the victims are.
And we knew that international law applied with varying rigor depending on the identity of the accused or the victim.
The fact that he doesn't bring up Israel here on this connection just shows how shallow his reflection is, because it's clear to anyone who's been watching that Israel and the Palestinians has been such an obvious, clear shredding of international law live streamed before our eyes for everyone to see. While his statement is true, it rings hollow because Canada still materially supports Israel's Palestinians, as does America. We're no different in that regard. So how can Mark Carney be pointing out things correctly while simultaneously hiding failures of the system? That in itself is him upholding that system, refusing to name Israel as the theirs. Mark Carney talks about how Canada and middle powers need greater strategic autonomy, which I agree with. We shouldn't be reliant entirely on one partner or one group of countries. We should be strategically autonomous and do what's best for Canadians. I also liked how Carney said he's shifting towards pragmatic relationships and accepting the world as it is and not how it ought to be.
Pragmatic in recognizing that progress is often incremental, that interests diverge, that not every partner will share all of our values. So we're engaging broadly, strategically, with open eyes. We actively take on the world as it is, not wait around for a world we wish to be.
I think here he's in particular referencing China. Especially within the last decade, China has become such a boogeyman in Canadian politics that it's almost become a bit of a third rail, at least to conservatives and liberals. And I think he's right on this front that we do need to be pragmatic without selling out our values.
We accept what's offered. We compete with each other to be the most accommodating. This is not sovereignty. It's the performance of sovereignty while accepting subordination.
So that's also a true statement, and it kind of alludes to how Canada has just been a subordinate little puppet to America for the past 80 years. Just accepting whatever shit America throws our way. Canada has become integrated and subordinate on America's foreign policy, Israel's foreign policy, our allies. Carney in here talks about how the world is moving towards law of the jungle, might makes right, which I agree is a bad direction to go into. It rings very hollow because now all of a sudden he cares about law of the jungle and might makes right because we are the target. Again, reminder, 2 weeks before this speech, the US invaded and attempted a coup on Venezuela under the clear pretext of stealing their oil, a blatant act of imperialist aggression. And Mark Carney, a couple weeks ago, welcomed the opportunity that brought. That's right, Mark Carney welcomed America's imperialist invasion of an oil-rich country in the Western Hemisphere that America says is theirs to dominate. I don't think he's had that big of a change of mind in 2 weeks. He's still under the Atlantic Anglo-supremacist frame of thinking, where some people are deserving of America's ire and some people are not. So it's a hard time believing that he's just realizing now that this is unsustainable and the rules-based international order can't be sustained through America's continued domination.
But let's be clear-eyed about where this leads. A world of fortresses will be poorer, more fragile, and less sustainable.
A world of fortresses is a world that goes against our collective best interests, and I agree. Humans are collaborative and flourish under cooperation, and fortresses don't tend to build that. So I agree with Carney here. Carney says hegemons are continuing to use their power to monetize their relationships.
Hegemons cannot continually monetize their relationships.
There's really two great powers on the planet. It's China and America. America's the big dog. America's who we're talking about here, really. The whole crux of the issue and starting point of the issue is Greenland being threatened by America. So just saying great powers somehow weirdly loops in China into this when China's done nothing wrong on that front. The only thing you can point to for China's trade policy being weaponized against us is in a trade war that we decided to join on America's behalf when we implemented 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs at America's request. All China did was reciprocate and then say, hey, if we both get rid of these, that'll be the deal. And that's what ended up happening. So I don't understand why he's looping in China when America is just fucking, again, rubbing its dick and balls all over the continent, the hemisphere. And China's just like, yeah, we are stable, rational partners. Doesn't make sense to me. Mark Carney says we need to be naming the reality.
The powerful have their power, but we have something too. The capacity to stop pretending, to name reality, to build our strength at home, and to act together.
And I agree, naming and shaming is the right thing to do here, which is what Carney doesn't do. He vaguely alludes to the US being the source of this and vaguely gestures towards the issues that the American empire has brought, while simultaneously glazing it, saying it brought about great things. His silence kind of still remains. I don't think we'll see a big change there. We shouldn't mourn the loss of what we had before the rules-based international order because nostalgia isn't a strategy.
We are taking the sign out of the window. We know the old order is not coming back. We shouldn't mourn it. Nostalgia is not a strategy.
I agree with Mark Carney. It isn't a strategy, but it's one that he's leaning into because he's still a capitalist pig who wants to maintain global capital domination, but he wants the Americans to have less global hegemony over the planet. That's essentially his position. It leans heavily on nostalgia. It leans to a time that really never existed without this violent disruption. It's only just now being recognized as such because Canada is a target. The empire continues. The New World Order. This is where Mark Carney's whole argument falls flat on its face. NATO. Mark Carney spent the speech talking about how we need to not be reliant on America, we need to be powerful and autonomous and secure, but then moves to what he's doing to empower and bolster the NATO military alliance.
Our commitment to NATO's Article 5 is unwavering. So we're working with our NATO allies, including the Nordic-Baltic Gate, to further secure the alliance's northern and western flanks, including through Canada's unprecedented investments in over-the-horizon radar, in submarines, in aircraft, and boots on the ground. Boots on the ice.
NATO is America's imperialist, offensive protection racket that has dominated the globe. Carney talks about how he wants to secure the alliance and secure the alliance's flanks in the north, the Arctic, calling it a shared objective with America. And that's just Mark Carney's stated military strategy. He wants to continue integration and cooperation with the fascist-led NATO military alliance, led by the very people that his speech is supposed to be decrying. It makes no sense. He is essentially just hearkening back to a time when he thinks NATO was a good thing and operated on principles and whatnot, but it's the same fallacy that he has been going throughout this speech. It's been built on a lie the whole time. So just pointing back to the historic part of NATO and saying we're going to expand and deepen our NATO alliance is stupid. It's stupid. It's doublespeak. Mark Carney talks about autonomy and sovereignty while saying that he wants further military integration and expansion with the fascist-led protection racket that is is NATO. These two things can't go together. You can't simultaneously be saying, oh, the whole world order is rotten and only exists because we seem to buy into it collectively, and then say, hey, we need to return and expand the world order NATO alliance because that's what we're doing already. It just doesn't make sense. NATO isn't an avenue of sovereignty. It's an avenue of American domination and sending Canadian dollars to buy American weapons and feed the military-industrial complex. Mark Carney's bragging about doubling defense spending.
We're doubling our defense spending by the end of this decade, and we're doing so in ways that build our domestic industries.
This is where Mark Carney wants people to just suspend disbelief. He points to, hey, we're doubling our military spending, our defense spending, and expecting the listener to connect that with defense against America. But that's not the case. This isn't a defense against America. Investing in the NATO-style offensive military is not a defense against America. It's actually opposite. It's inviting them in, accepting subordination further, which is the antithesis to the whole speech. So it doesn't make sense why Carney is still harping on about NATO and how excellent it is, when the precursor to this speech was Donald Trump's acute threats to another NATO country in Greenland. Buddy, that's you. You are upholding that. You are trying to build that. So Mark Carney's bragging about the militarization, defense spending. He's trying to get defense contractors who are in the room interested in building things in Canada. Mark Carney says we avoided calling out the gaps between rhetoric and reality. Well, I'm going to do that right now. Mark Carney, your rhetoric is one posturing against America, being strong against Trump's threats. But the reality is you want to further integrate with the United States, maybe with some diversifying of trade partners, but militarily wants to integrate further with America. So his rhetoric is one thing, the reality is another. He wants to uphold the entire rotten system. He wants to put that sign back out in the window that he doesn't believe in. He just doesn't want America on top, but he's willing to further integrate with America. It just doesn't make any sense. So here's the thing. Mark Carney is now parroting Global South talking points while maintaining the domineering nature of Canada's foreign policy. Mark Carney's still providing material support to Israel throughout their Palestinians and apartheid of all of Palestine.
We participated in the rituals, and we largely avoided calling out the gaps between rhetoric and reality.
This motherfucker doesn't care about human rights. He doesn't care about calling out rhetoric and reality. He's just there to make money. And that's why I started this off with the anti-socialist underlying thing here, is he doesn't want to rock the boat, simultaneously wants to signal to people that he's shaking things up, but he's not. He's just not. So with respect to NATO, he's bragging about all the investments we're doing, protecting the Arctic, boots on the ice, and we're working against the real enemies of Canada. And who is that? Oh, Russia, China. The reason there's focus on the Arctic is because that's what America wants. That's what the military-industrial complex and State Department wants. So Mark Carney's still signaling, hey, I'm a compliant little dog. I'll do what you ask, but you're being too mean about it. He's just signaling that he's a good boy who's working against the real enemies, which is just xenophobia, I guess. The rhetoric of Carney says, hey, I'm standing up to the bullies. I'm standing up to America. When the reality is that NATO is America's offensive military protection racket, and it always has been. And that reality is undeniable. But Mark Carney will continue to deny it because it's not convenient to his capitalist narrative. This rupture and American dominance of particularly the global south and violence that capitalism has brought upon the world has been the entire post-World War II global order of things. America's just been dominating the globe, and Canada is now just waking up to that conclusion when it has been a fact forever. It's just now that like-minded democracies are the target, now we gotta wake up a bit without actually changing the military structural alliance that we've engaged in. America has rubbed its dick and balls all over the planet. They've got at least 800 military bases across the globe that we know of. And Canada is just now coming to that conclusion because Donald Trump makes that contradiction impossible to ignore. That we live under a false, rules-based international order that favors global powers and punishes the global south. Onto the opposition's take on it, the Conservative Party.
Prime Minister Carney's well-crafted and eloquently delivered speech at Davos has been widely noted, and I want to start by offering my own praise.
PP essentially said this was amazing, well-crafted speech, fantastically delivered. PP, the Conservative Party, share the exact same capitalist values as the Liberal Party. PP is essentially 100% in line with Mark Carney's speech.
And he says that he agrees with the Prime Minister that Canada must work with like-minded allies and become more self-reliant. But then the disagreement pops up. And
he just wants more fossil fuel extraction, I guess, more pipelines.
Now, we must approve pipelines. No pipelines are approved, anti-development laws removed. Mr. Carney has not removed a single law or bureaucracy, or approved a single pipeline, or removed the industrial carbon tax. There are hundreds of billions of private dollars looking to invest in wildly profitable projects like a pipeline to the Pacific, repealing anti-pipeline and anti-development laws to legalize fast and safe approval of pipelines, a new pipeline to the Pacific, which would ship 1 million barrels a day and $30 billion a year.
That's pretty much the difference, I guess, at this point.
We must approve pipelines.
Liberal Party and Conservative Party are parties for the ruling class, made up of the ruling class. PP has to essentially swallow his pride and show class solidarity with the ruling class and say, hey, I liked the speech, it was really good. At the end of the day, the speech was capitalist narrative reinforcing NATO
from hostile powers like China, Russia, and Iran.
Further integration with the American military-industrial complex, in a way capitulation to America, while vaguely gesturing that America's kind of bad. What was Trump's response to all this? Well,
we're building a golden dome that's going to, just by its very nature, going to be defending Canada. Canada gets a lot of freebies from us, by the way. They should be grateful also, but they're not. I watched your Prime Minister yesterday. He wasn't so grateful. But they should be grateful to us. Canada.
Trump said some stuff like Canada exists because the United States allows it to, which is kind of true. That's kind of the agreement Canada and the US have come to under NATO. It's a protection racket. He's just saying the quiet part out loud, that, hey, this is a protection racket and you're misbehaving.
They should be grateful to us. Canada.
Trump also talks about his Golden Dome and desire to build it further on Greenland.
All we want from Denmark for national and international security and to keep our very energetic and dangerous potential enemies at bay is this land on which we're going to build the greatest golden dome ever built. We're building a golden dome that's going to, just by its very nature, going to be defending Canada.
And apparently Mark Carney's opposition to building the Golden Dome on Greenland. Trump's talk about this exposes Carney's double standard of imperialism. Since his election, Mark Carney has been quietly supportive of Trump's Golden Dome project.
There are certain areas where we will want to be integrated and continue to fully cooperate with the United States. I would suggest, some others have a different view, but hypersonic missile defense is one of those areas where we're going to want to do, and we have those discussions with.
Which would see fascist military installations being installed across the country, built on the lie that Russia somehow poses a territorial threat to the Canadian North, which it just doesn't. Sorry.
We're building a golden dome.
I sincerely hope that this little shakeup makes Carney wake up and see that the Golden Dome is a stupid, stupid idea.
But they should be grateful to us, Canada.
By a stupid man, and him buying into that is maintaining that illusion that Mark Carney apparently says he's completely broken now.
The illusion begins to crack.
I sincerely hope Mark Carney backs up some of his words with actions and not quiet capitulation to America and the global capitalist world order. That's what he's going to keep doing, though, because he's a capitalist pig who has class solidarity with capital-owning class people, the people he was talking to in that speech. That's pretty much my thoughts on Mark Carney's Davos speech. Meh. It rings very hollow. Those are my thoughts on the speech. Want want everybody to take care, peace and love. Mark Carney, Donald Trump, free Palestine. Till next time.